Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran Kansas City jazz guitarist Beau Bledsoe on the Alaturka 2020 CD KU Ensemble 1. We spoke early on in the pandemic of 2020 about his life at the time and his career. We reacquainted ourselves here in December in the waning days of 2020, and he opened up about this new live disc and how things have evolved over a surreal year on Earth. Enjoy.
Hey, Beau, thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Nice to hear from you. I think last time we talked was the beginning of the pandemic, right?
Oh, man, and that's kind of where I wanted to start with everything. I remember, in the early goes of this, there was a lot of people that were just kind of in disarray about what was going on, but you were one of those people that really genuinely was kind of relieved, and you were teaching your son an instrument, and so how's everything kind of transpired? And I saw you live on September 11th, so kind of how's everything been going for you?
Oh, gosh. Man, it's moved in different stages. Regarding my son, of course, we were going around and just kind of playing for people's driveways early on during the shutdown. And he ended up starting to just be on a lot of gigs and playing with a lot of the people that I play with, just because it was kind of easy, and he was doing a really good job, and he was getting some mentorship. And then, the school thing started, where we were, both having to teach both of our kids from home, and that changed his trajectory quite a bit. But he did manage to, amass some money and start a Roth IRA and learn a lot about just what it's like to earn as a musician.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, that's real world stuff, and I guess that's kind of a part of the conversation here with the silver linings of all of this. The one good thing is that seeing you live with Ensemble Iberica and being down in that kind of what you call the Mad Max dungeon.
Yeah.
Which was totally apropos, because it did feel post-apocalyptic. It felt totally strange, as everything has in 2020. What was your response to actually getting able to perform live?
We started doing a series in the summer called the Garden Concert Series. And there's a guy in my neighborhood who's a chef named Craig Howard, who ran Howard's Cafe, which has since closed recently. And he has a farm in the Northeast, which is where I live. So we started doing kind of distance picnic blanket concerts where people would, they're all like 10 feet apart, and we have some designated people that would seat them, and there was no real, service. They would everything was preset. And we did 5 of those, and they were really successful. All sold out except I think the last one, because it was super cold. And we wrapped those up in October on the 24th. And then, that's definitely something I'm going to do again when it warms up, because they were a lot of fun. Because the garden that we were in is where a lot of the food came from. It's kind of this synergistic experience of music and food. But, that kept us going for a while. And then really just kind of learned how to do all this virtual presenting, bought a whole lot of gear, watched a lot of YouTube videos on live streaming. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. We have a virtual content area on our webpage. And then we started something called the Passport Series, which is a paired wine tasting. There's one January 9th with Portugal. So we have all these Portuguese wines and a sommelier, and the chef at Tannin is making Portuguese food. And then on February 5th, we're going to do Argentina, May 6th, Spain, April 2nd, Mexico. And by the time, April's going to be coming around, it's going to be getting warm again, that we can start going back to this garden presentation model. But the Passport thing is selling well. It's all a la carte, and it's odd. We've only had 8 sales, but so many of them are like the people buying the whole series, and they're putting on a lot of extra bottles of wine and different food, and there's a whole bunch of people in their party. So, they've become kind of big-ticket items. I didn't know how that was going to shake out. I mean, all of this is totally new, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and all of this is such uncharted territory. And I guess one of the things that I'm reaching out to you about is there's a new live CD, the KU Jazz Ensemble 1. That has to be a pretty joyous thing to release a live album during a period of just pretty much unanimously no live gigs.
Yeah, honestly, Joe, it's how can I move things forward a little bit, keep the people that I work with kind of busy and engaged. We did a retreat to the Ozarks back in October, and Rich Wheeler was on that job. And we took our new cellist, Ezgi Karakush, who's from Turkey. So we ended up playing a lot of music on this retreat, and we made a live recording and a video. It's up on our YouTube page if you want to see it. But that ended up just Rich and I talking a lot about our past and Alaturka, and he was very insistent that I listen to this live recording that we did a long time ago that he had copies of. I'd never even heard it. And he said that as is, that it's publishable, and it's a great document of all of us kind of in our peak form, and that the peak form of that particular band. And it's got big band accompaniment, and it all turned out really nice. I remember it being a very special concert and being just bewildered that it was occurring in real time. It was one of those weird concerts that you can't believe that it's happening, even though you've been rehearsing and you know it's coming. That it just sounds so incredible that it's almost like a dream state. I remember being sort of stupefied by just how cool it sounded. But yeah, it's all released, the whole thing.
Yeah, and you got a great ensemble. I mean, you got Rich, you got Jeff Harshbarger, you got Brandon Draper. I mean, you talk about, a lot of these, kind of personalities, and, you got the Turkish-American vibe. Talk to me a little bit about how all of this kind of came together and culminated with this show.
Well, Brandon and Jeff are on the faculty there. I think they're both adjunct professors. And, Rich went to school there, so big KU connection with Alaturka. Dan Gailey, who's someone I greatly admire, is probably one of the most interesting full-time tenured academics in any music program. I just can't believe he stays artistically relevant and takes sabbaticals and is always really challenging himself as an artist, which, in my experience, someone that has a faculty job that just saps that right out of them, he somehow keeps that place well-funded, keeps a great attitude, really puts his thumb on the students, gets great performances out of them. It's kind of this balance of setting the tone and just still remaining a relevant, good artist with a full-time faculty job. I don't understand how he does it. I've never seen it. But anyway, we've collaborated a couple of times together, and we would come in as kind of clinicians and just talk about playing Turkish music. And that ended up, he asked for some of the charts that we made, because we had written out all of these Turkish music pieces in finale and kind of Western notation where they could easily be understood by anyone with chord changes, like a jazz chart. And they took those, and you could see the arrangement accreditations there, with Brad Cox and Clint Ashlock. All these guys are real heavy hitters. And yeah, it all came out swimmingly. It was, Dan's arrangement was incredible too.
So, as we look into migrating from this year of 2020 into 2021, I keep saying, it's going to be a revival. And, there were seeds of it in 2020 with live shows. Your, Ensemble Alaturka, Bobby Watson played, Jackie Myers had all of these shows coordinated.
Mm-hmm.
Lonnie McFadden's opened a new club. Eddie Moore, We the People, Freedom Affair with Hazelton and the group. How do you see kind of things panning out for this town that is definitely a jazz town, definitely active, definitely one of the most active jazz organisms in this country? What do you see the revival, the rebirth, the coming back to life looking like as the year progresses and the vaccine takes hold and things start coming alive?
Well, Kansas City has always been a very, go out and listen to music town. And honestly, I was experiencing playing live a lot up until really the weather change. And that and the COVID numbers, we all just kind of agreed to take a break, do other things, and wait it out till, it warmed up again and, the vaccine started helping. But, there's been plenty of articles speculating about what this year is going to be bringing. If you look at what happens, of course, pandemics are cyclical human events. It's just that they happen so infrequently that we don't remember them. But if you go back and look after every major pandemic, there's some huge resurgence of just craziness and economic growth. There are also a lot of articles stating that there's going to be sort of a cultural dark age. There was one in the New York Times, I think, yesterday stating that. But I've always been kind of a glass half full kind of person. And even in this environment, I've stayed active. I've released 3 recordings. A lot of it has been admin and fundraising work for me. Having a nonprofit thing has really, really helped with getting donations and keeping everything afloat. And of course, we've had access to the PPP money, and looks like we will here again in a few days. So I've been able to, with myself and the board, keep everyone in work. Colleen Deeker's been kind of the principal musician I work with because she's in my neighborhood. It's easy, and my son really likes playing with her. But we were just kind of adding up all the 1099s from all the musicians, and we were able to pay a small group of musicians, $33,000 in these times. And, we're kind of patting ourselves on the back for doing that. It's not as much as we usually do, but that's pretty substantial,
Yeah.
That's, and a lot of it, our donations are right under, there'll be more coming in because it's December. They're right under 30,000 for the year of just people giving $5-10 here. We've seen tremendous support, and the family foundations that we depend on every year, like the Stern Foundation or Francis Family, Kaufman's, really upped their grants this year. In all of my applications, I framed us as, we're going to be definitely surviving. We're getting through this. This is all the things we're doing. And we're continuing our educational outreach programs to schools. We're everything's maintaining in just different levels. But yeah, to answer the larger picture, I don't see us in concert halls shoulder to shoulder for a real long time. At best October. I don't want to, I'm a guitar player. I'm not going to be making predictions like that. But there are a lot of ways to serve. And we're just going to keep going.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody recently say to me, they don't want to look back on this year and see it as time wasted, and I guess that's the idea, is that no matter what we do, we have to live, we have to keep moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming from my perspective of somebody that really enjoys going out and seeing music, clearly, I mean, even while this was going on, coming out and seeing you at the show in September, and just overall, I wonder what's going to happen with the clubs around here. I know that maybe the Blue Room will have a little bit more of immunity because there's city funding for the museum, but I wonder about other places like the Green Lady and some other places that really are a huge part of the fabric of this town. What do you see with all of that? What's your viewpoint on reopening and, staying alive and that kind of a thing?
From what I'm seeing, as someone that's running a cultural musical ensemble, we don't have brick and mortar. We don't have a lot of expenses, so we were able to, with the planning of the board, really go into a stasis of at first crisis and figure out what to do with our money and get us into the next year. But I just can't imagine if you have, we only have 2 salaried people in our ensemble, so we also just went down to making decisions of myself and the board president, so we could be very nimble day to day, and nothing moves slowly, and we weren't hand wringing. That was a real advantage. But I think for a lot of arts organizations where there's a large board, there are a lot of moving components, this is really, really difficult. And a lot of these performing arts organizations, they have a mandate to spend money. They have these enormous accounts of money that has to go. So watching them kind of deal with that and moving over to live streaming or making large video pieces, but just how slowly that was to react. I mean, a lot of these pieces that I've been involved with much larger programs maybe happened last month or are happening now, and it took them that long to sort of get it up and running. Clubs, man, that's a whole nother thing. Steve Tulipan is a good friend of mine, and we've been in contact a lot on how he's keeping things going. And I cannot imagine it without some really, really specific government funding like they've done. And, I'm in contact with a lot of other musicians that live in markets like Portugal or Argentina or Spain, and they're just being totally just propped up for the time being. And the way the PPP financing worked was, a salary-based thing, but man, those restaurants have way different expenditures. So I think we're already seeing a lot of our music venues being trimmed off. It seems like one leaves every week lately. It's starting to happen at a really fast rate. All I'm hearing really is just kind of rumors within the community. Who's hanging on, who's making it work. Some people are just kind of blessed with, this is a really huge space and the air moves around and we can socially distance the tables really easily. But, someplace like Rieger or what have you, it's impossible to serve people in COVID times. They're just, the architecture and the way their business just doesn't work. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I was looking for. I think a lot of those thoughts that you put out there are very key to it. I've kind of gotten that notion from, even in the summertime, there was a lot of clubs in New York that were just like, I don't know what we're going to do. And I think, no one really knows how this is going to pan out. But I think, a lot of people said that in the world of small businesses, 1 out of 3 are going to close during this, without a doubt. And I've noticed that, and I think that's been kind of coming through. And I'm just hoping that, the jazz world is not one that gets into music for the money. It's not a lucrative thing. So I think there's a level of survival that's different. So I personally am hoping that things kind of come back. But I think the jazz world is going to mimic the world at large. I think there's a lot of things that are going to have to resuscitate, and they're going to have to just kind of limp along until things, start coming above water.
Yeah, this is true. I've been talking to Mark Lowry a lot recently. You know, he's trying to kind of up his live stream game and move things away from just using phone and Facebook. And a lot of it has been just sharing ideas and technological ideas with my peers. And I'm actually surprised a lot of places have gone this far. I thought for sure, they're going to make it to October or December. For instance, the Ship, you know, they just moved their whole bar to an out-facing thing in the alley. Those guys are just so incredibly scrappy.
Yeah.
And now that it's cold, they just rented out this huge warehouse next door where, again, it's just a matter of space and air circulation, and they're serving in there. And, you know, Corvino's has kind of a similar blessing where they just have an enormous space, and the stage is way far from everyone. They're, you know, those guys are probably going to make it through this, it looks like, you know. And they're constantly messing with their model. It's been fascinating to watch their just scrappiness.
And I think that's key to all of this is just survival and being as tenacious as possible. And, you know, this too shall pass. I keep hearing that, and I know it's hard to realize, but, you know, none of us has been through this, but it's going to be a thing where as sudden as it came, it's going to be the same way whenever it's over with. We're going to look back, and I don't think I'm ever going to look at a baseball game and say, wow, I want to watch the highlights when there were cutouts in the crowd. But I'm definitely going to be, you know, this is going to be a very unique time in history. So, you know, the one thing, too, I think I may have brought up to you, and I just kind of want to know your thoughts on it. One of my final questions here is, you know, I've routinely asked educators and very involved musicians, especially with your business savvy here, you know, I used to ask how healthy is jazz in, say, 2016 or 17 or 19, and since this pandemic, I never have to ask that again because I'm astonished at how many gigs all of you musicians have lost. Has that been something you've thought about, like how this pandemic has really illuminated how strong the jazz community is?
Man, it's a case-by-case basis. You know, Rich and I were talking about this just the other day on, you know, it's kind of easy to imagine, you know, what venues are going to be there, which venues are not going to be there. But there are a lot of people that are really were on the fence about having a music career even before all this started. You know, there are musicians that are kind of lifers. That's like all they can do. That's their only skill set. That's what they think about when they wake up in the morning. You know, I'm definitely one of those. Like there's nothing else I would be doing. You know, I may be in the arts in some other capacity, but that's just how my mind works. But, you know, I've noticed a lot of musicians, you know, driving trucks now or, you know, doing just totally other occupations. They're kind of washed their hands of a music career, although maybe temporarily. But that's all. It's you know, it's not a jazz question. It's an artist by artist question of your survival skills. And honestly, Joe, you know, most of my time has been spending, I call it internet button mashing. I'm just trying to make things occur, and it's mostly been admin work, and it's pretty rare I get to sit down and enjoy my guitar lately, especially this winter, because I'm, you know, just either grant writing or thinking of new programs to sell online. But, I played my Portuguese guitar yesterday for the first time in months, and I was like, what is this thing? Oh, God, it sounds so good. Like I've kind of forgotten and lost touch with a lot of the reasons that I do it. You know, even though, you know, I was able to make 3 nice recordings, still, that's just, you're in a studio, you're being more of a producer. But sitting down, just me and the instrument, is a rare thing lately. I know that'll come back, but the practice of playing an instrument. And I've noticed a lot of players are going through that. You know, the daily thing of playing your instrument has become difficult because you're hustling so many other angles.
Yeah, I have. I've heard very surprising things. I've heard things that just make sense. But yeah, there's just been a lot of, I mean, when the early goes of this was happening, there was a lot of people that were shifting to a techno model and doing more producing and things like that. And then, you know, there's like Jackie Myers was doing, you know, promoting shows, and there's been a lot of people that have just really wanted to keep music as a part of their lives, but you have to shift the paradigm of what you're doing. And to be honest with you, out of all the interviews that I've done, and I've been very steadfast since March, done hundreds, and there was only one person that literally just couldn't take it. It was just the curtains parted on the notion that they never really get paid that much through Spotify and for all the music that gets downloaded, and it's frustrating now that we're all at home and have more latitude to do it. The pay model hasn't really increased. Now, there was some free days with Bandcamp, or, you know, like you could get the full cost of an album, but those were only 1 day. You know, so I think there's that too, and I think lots of this being, you know, in a reflective mode is probably going to give musicians pause. But I also believe too that there's a lot of musicians out there that have made it and have been wealthy and have traveled for years and years and years without a break that are probably relieved and may not ever go back to what they were doing before. I think there's a lot of things in our society that may not go back to the way it was before, like consulting and on an in-person basis. You know, Zoom could take over. Things are going to really change. People are going to really look, and corporations are always looking at, you know, cinching up dollars and cents, and there's a lot of these things that can be done away with, like travel and things like that. That's unfortunate. I think that the human element may be sniped out of it because people want to save money. So there's so many things that are fascinating, and there's so much of this dust that is not even near being settled where we can even look back and say, okay, we see models that are happening now.
You know, I'm recalling our first conversation when I think one of the first things we said, it was like the worst thing you can say is like when it gets back to normal. That's the first, that's move number one, is you have to accept that. You know? Yep. But, yeah, well said, man. And, you know, I talk to Jackie a lot, and, you know, we don't talk about music. We talk about, I call them the Chinese boxes. We're always, you know, some little interface that goes to this thing, or because all this live streaming stuff is so new. It's a lot like the early days of digital recording. It's just the gear's not made for it, you know.
Yeah.
So we're well, how does this thing work? What's the latency problems with this box? And you know, we buy gear off of each other and try things out, but man, we never talk about music. But we're working in the same industry.
You know, it's interesting. Speaking of Jackie, my wife got an old piano from her grandmother, and we moved it this summer into the house, and Jackie came over and tuned it, and she started teaching my stepdaughter lessons. And we were just kind of talking about all of the things that she's had to do to kind of keep things afloat. And at one point I'd mentioned a new album that I came across, and it was the King of Sudanese Jazz, and it's a sound that I've never heard before. And I interviewed this cat. He was in Sudan, and his English, it was really rough for him, but we got through it, and it was fascinating because the pandemic's opened up doors to speaking and illuminating music like that. If you have the chance, let me look this up here. If you want to just hear something, I don't know if you've ever heard him. His name is Sharabil Ahmed, and he's the King of Sudanese Jazz. And the collection, I mean, it's guitar driven, and it's one of the, and you'll appreciate this because of your palette that's so wide internationally. This is one of the most unique sounds I've ever heard. And before one of her show in mid-July, she was playing this over the loudspeaker before because she was really into it. And it's just, these are the kinds of gems and things that I personally have seen and run into. And to be able to interview this gentleman who is just totally, you know, interesting with his background in the music. So there's so many of those things that I think that have gone into this pandemic that may never have happened before.
Well, that's a good point, John. Because you heard the recording, all these artists here are going to know about him, and it's very likely he's going to be touring here more. And the recording thing has sort of flipped back on what it used to be. It's really a thing that gets you other kinds of work. It's like a work sample calling card. They can't. The streaming model. I mean, a lot of it's our fault, but it's super bad. But you have to keep making recordings, and you have to keep publishing, but they earn in really different ways.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that a lot of those things are probably going to hopefully work themselves out. But I think what we're all realizing, and what I've realized with a lot of musicians that I've interviewed, is that there's going to be nothing that will ever replace the live model. There's definitely a thirst for it. I mean, jazz, at the end of the day, is also a conversation. So, I mean, I don't understand that as a musician, but I do understand that from the standpoint of covering something that I do watch live, and I understand that the interplay is very integral. I mean, there's been so many shows that I've caught at both the Green Lady and the Blue Room just here in town that have just been astonishing me. The last show, and I don't know if I had said this in our first interview, the last show that I caught before all of this went down was Bill Frisell, and I remember taking my wife Amanda to it, and I couldn't really describe what Bill was going to give. You never quite know. And he had his trio. Petra Hayden was singing. We were at Nelson. It was March 4th. I remember running into Jeff Harshbarger. He was getting ready to go to Paris for 2 weeks. There was all of this, like, post-Super Bowl town fervor in the air, and it was good. And we kind of heard a little bit about Corona, but it was, no one knew what was going to happen. And at one point, towards the end of the show, Petra stood up and started singing We Shall Overcome, and she kind of had this, like, flowy church robe on, and everybody in the crowd in unison just started plucking up. Like, everybody kind of knew what was coming, but didn't really know. And everybody started singing and swaying We Shall Overcome in unison. And then, of course, due to the eclectic nature of Bill and what he does, they played Ziggy Stardust right after that by Bowie. So,
wow.
So it was intense, and I look back on that and how many people were in that crowd, and he did a question and answer afterwards, and how many people stuck around. And I think that was in the BC before Corona era, the last live show in that old world that I caught, and it was phenomenal. But, that's gone, and I'm not even saying it in a negative way. It just is. We're all going to look back at ticket stubs and memories we have and say that was an era that is just not here anymore. I mean, we've been cleansed of anything that we think we're going to, like you said, going back to normal. That's gone. It's going to be a new world with new precautions and new fears. As if Americans needed it, we got it, and that's it. So.
Yeah, this recording that you're writing about, I think it's probably earned us maybe $40. Like, we just kind of know. I mean, I think we literally called it a fart in the wind, but it's gotten this interview. Bill Brownlee wrote that he thought it was real similar to the Gil Evans Sketches of Spain thing with Miles, and good press is almost impossible to get these days. And we're definitely leveraging those quotes, and it's highly likely that some other university will hire us to come in and use these charts and have us perform because of this recording.
Well, I've been trying to do all I can to just definitely not slow down. I've sped up in a way that I've never ever done with this show to make sure that I'm doing what I can to give airplay and to give a voice to an already very raw group. And I think that's been the thing, is the jazz musicians tend to be the best kind of people on the planet, personally, I believe. And I believe they're the most raw and open about their feelings. There's no hiding. And I think this pandemic has provided another level of that, and I think it's very important for people to listen and to understand. And I've just waited for a long time for people to go back to kind of an aggro analog more refined state of music that I believe jazz is. I believe it's one of the highest art forms on the planet, and it's definitely one that America has brought to the world that's been hugely positive. So,
yeah, it's weird that it even exists. It's just saying the story out loud. It's such an American story, such a painful story. But I often find myself in other parts of the world just saying it out loud and being amazed that it happened.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I'm not a jazz musician. I don't know standard number one. But I hang out with a lot of them, and I love playing with them.
This has been great, man. I really appreciate the fact that I can catch back up with you. I've done that with several musicians because it's interesting. No one really knew how this was going to manifest. So to get back to talk with people that I talked to early on, because I think there was a notion that by this time maybe things would have changed enough and there would be more going on. But it's good to kind of be in touch and to keep the conversation going, because I think it's a good thing to do. Definitely a good thing to do.
Well, I guess I'll hear from you in 5 or 6 months, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully I'll just come up to you after a show. Maybe that'll be the way that we do it. We do it in person.
Yeah, that sounds real nice.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We'll give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Lawrence, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Beau for his time and his dedication to the Kansas City jazz scene. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.